So I'm going to take an opportunity at this time, provided that there's no litigation pending against the town, because I don't think there is, I haven't heard there is. But we're talking about a very crucial issue, and I'm speaking as a citizen in the United States. There's nothing more important than our constitutional freedoms and protections under the Bill of Rights. And the United States Supreme Court, as well as every circuit court across this country, has realized, even Ninth Circuit Court of California, the most liberal court, of the importance of maintaining adequate zoning for the commercial sale of firearms in retail establishments, and more so that it is a Second Amendment constitutional right under the 14th Amendment of the United States. And the United States Supreme Court has made it very clear that when a municipality or a county, and New Jersey is one of only 5 states that allow a municipality through its constitution to regulate the retail sale of firearms and ammunition. And what nothing against our attorneys, but there needs to be a lot of thought, a lot of research, otherwise you're going to face lawsuits on this matter. Because not only can a citizen bring up the lawsuit, the person that is a licensed retailer can bring up what's known as an individual lawsuit for discrimination if other people have been treated in similar situation differently than a particular individual. And I'm not going to cite all the cases here. I mean, you know, I got dozens of them I've been reviewing for the last 6 months. But the issue is so important that we're talking about, and I know everyone up here is pro-business and want to see all our vacant stores and our commercial fronts filled to the point. But I go back to, since I'm here, there's been 4 licensed retail gun establishments in the commercial zones, and then 1 was moved into the industrial park. The rumor is that you're planning on zoning into the industrial park. And I go back to, again, some of the court decisions. I can make them available to anybody that wants to see them for you. I'm not going to sit here and read them verbatim. But when the courts look at a First Amendment issue, such as adult bookstores or adult toy stores or whatever you want to call them, they look at the secondary effects of that establishment. And the courts have long recognized that with that type of establishment comes criminal activities of prostitution and other criminal activities. And therefore, the Supreme Court and courts have ruled that, yes, as long as you don't infringe upon the constitutional right of free speech of that individual, you can zone that into a different location. But to the contrary, the courts have realized that there is no detriment to a lawful retail firearms establishment, because not only do they have to pass the scrutiny and backgrounds and checks, but anybody that goes and buys them, guns from them, have to do criminal background checks. And the courts have said that municipalities or zoning courts have failed to show a detriment to a retail license establishment, and they've also ruled that there is no detriment to the community as an input business. Now, some people are anti-gun, that's one thing, but the fact is they could be anti-gun, but there's a constitutional, and the Supreme Court, as well as our courts, circuit courts, the Court of Appeals have all ruled, and they go to the dicta by the Supreme Court, that you have not only the constitutional right, but attached to that are secondary things such as the sale of ammunition, retail, there's fire ranges, because many states require that you be proficient in the use of a firearm. And those municipalities or states, municipalities or counties in various states that have banned firearms ranges was contrary to a Second Amendment. And a very interesting thing that we have here, and I don't want to go specific because everybody knows I'm on the Board of Adjustment, so I don't want to mix 2 cases. I'm here as a resident, I'm not speaking as a board member. But it is a matter of public record that there is and has been other licensed retail establishment in commercial zones. So the issue is looking at what the court says, is this individual being treated differently than others have been treated? And this is a question that I had posed to various people. I don't want to see us in litigation over, to me, it's the most crucial Bill of Rights. And many people, you know, they hear about the Boston Tea Party. They fail to know that one of the biggest criteria that led to the Revolutionary War was the king's intent to impose sanctions on guns and ammunition, black powder back then, and the seizure of weapons from our armories and from citizens. So it's one of the most crucial, because if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be here. We'd be also absolutely clean. And I'm a firm believer in it. I spent 28.5 years in law enforcement. I spent 4 years here doing all the backgrounds. And there's thousands of people right here in Lacey Township that own guns. And I know when I was here, the monthly average ranged from 30 to 60 applicants a month for firearms. And at September 11th anniversary, they go up. Christmas, they go up. And again, I know you guys are pro-business. I know you guys take seriously your job up there. This is in no way criticism, but it's asking you to take further input and further thought before you make those changes, because there's no doubt that eventually it could lead, I'm not saying it's going to, but it could lead to a court challenge. In every court that I've read, I mean, there's no court higher than the Supreme Court, and when the Supreme Court says, two of the most recent cases was Heller, where the Supreme Court struck down the District of Columbia's restrictions on purchasing and owning firearms in the District of Columbia. And the McDonald case out of Chicago, the Supreme Court originally in Esso struck down the restrictions on firearms and fire ranges, and Chicago reenacted the same things and more restrictions. And in the McDonald case, the Supreme Court struck that down. So it's a long-standing, all the way back to the inception. Even Thomas Jefferson wrote about the inherent right to not only manufacture guns, sell them, and so forth. But there's a number of cases, and again, it's both a First Amendment issue as well as the 14th Amendment issue. And the McDonald case, the Judge Chang in that particular case didn't go by the 1889 interpretation based on the 14th Amendment, went back to the 1791, the original intent of the Constitution. And again, it's, you know, I believe in everybody's right, as long as they're a law-abiding citizen, and they pass it. And New Jersey has probably some of the most strictest gun laws in the country that are legal. There's other ones that have them that, you know, are being challenged constantly. But it's an important right, and I just want to make sure that it's such an important right that we do it correctly.
So I'll jump in on it. So, I mean, if somebody wants to challenge us on any of our zoning ordinances, that's their right. But as a township, we have the right to zone some of this property as we feel fit. Having said that, nobody's trying to zone out firearms. But the problem that we're having, or I feel that we're having down in the building department, is putting a burden on the zoning officer, because there's nothing explicit in our zoning ordinances that say what they're allowed to do in regards to gun sales. So by doing this, we're sort of trying to give them a little bit more guidance instead of putting the burden on the employees that work in the township, because it's not fair to them to have to make a judgment call on stuff like this. And further, so the idea is, yes, to put it in the business park, and it's not the you know, by putting it in the business park, it's not the be all and end all of gun sales. If that's how the people of Lacey choose to buy their choose to buy guns. They also have the ability to seek a variance before the zoning board if they wanted to, say, if Walmart wants to sell guns or something like that. Then Walmart has the ability to say, well, we're not going to go sell them in the business park. We want to sell them where we're at. They have the ability to go to the zoning board and apply for a use variance. It's to sort of give the guidance to the zoning officials down in the building department.
Well, and I fully understand what you're saying, but again, if I own commercial property in the town, and you further restrict my ability to rent that commercial property, which you're doing by you have commercial property up and down Lacey Road, up and down Route 9, that in the past, let's say Fishbone was a licensed firearm dealer on Lacey Road across from the school. Rose Kretzer, which is now the Education Academy across from Aves, was a licensed dealer and sold at that location. You had Henry Della's, a place that used to be on Route 9 right at the corner of Sunrise was the license giver. And you had Jumeirah, who eventually wound up in the industrial park, even though the industrial park. And what I'm saying is, moving into the industrial park, just look at it, if I'm coming in here to open a business, and if we're business friendly, higher rent per square footage. Further restrictions because there are multiple units. Am I going to have a firearm shop with ammunition, which includes black powder, by the way, next to a welding shop? So there's a whole bunch of areas where you're talking about public safeties and issues.
Yeah,
and there should be certain restrictions.
I don't want to debate. I get where you're coming from, but you could. I mean, and I know what you're talking in terms of you know, the issue that's come before the town recently. But there's those same issues are in that building also. But besides that, it just because it's not a good excuse to sit there and say, you know, I'm going to pay higher rent so I can't afford it. I can't go out and, you know, start Disneyland because I don't have enough money. Nobody's gonna sit there and say, I can't afford the rent to open that up. And it's not a fair argument.
I understand what you're saying, but based on all the case law that I've read, zoning boards have restricted the ability of retail firearms establishments. Yeah, here, you want to talk, there's case law right on it that, and in Teixeira versus County of Alameda, which the Circuit Court 9th District.
I will stipulate that you know way more case law than I do.
But what I'm trying to say in this particular case is the court looked at previous case decisions and if we're justifying someone ammunition, how can we say you're not justified under the Second Amendment in selling a firearm? And we have that case right now in Lacey.
But you
can't issue and say that you're okay to sell.
I get what you're saying, but it's not like anybody can't go out and get a gun. You have retail sales right now, the home retail sales in town that you can purchase guns from,
which are illegal by your own ordinance.
Which is why we're trying to button it up.
Okay.
Your own ordinance prohibits.
Yeah. That's through a different authority. Those are different authorities. It doesn't go through the town for the home-based business for those sales of guns. We have nothing to say about it.
In order to have an FSI, you have to have a certificate from the zoning office. And your municipal zoning code for home occupancy prohibits retail sales of any kind in a home.
I don't.
We're firearm licensed by this town. See, that's what I'm saying. The town has never in the history. And there's one other thing you have to take into consideration. And I don't mean to argue the case, but I was hoping that there would have been at least a form holding it after it's adopted and so forth.
It's not adopted.
It's not adopted.
There's two readings.
There's
the
two
first
readings.
reading.
I don't think any one of us, if you would object, if you want to take a look at what we're proposing or to propose it differently, I mean, we'd be certainly glad to listen.
Well, I know just in the commercial zones along Lacey Road and Route 9, dozens of vacant storefronts. I don't know how many are available in industrial.
That's a decision between a landlord and a tenant. It has nothing to do with the township. If you don't think any of these spaces can be filled if somebody's trying to get $1 per square foot in rent,
yeah, well,
that's what it's coming down to. It has nothing to do with the township.
But see, you're in a situation, and and that's what I'm trying to say. If you're going to clarify the zoning, and I'm not an expert. I mean, I sat there a long time.
Really, it's just to try and give some guidance in the building department. That's really it. It's unfair to have our officials make a judgment call about whether something should or should not be.
Yeah, but that's when in doubt. That's why they're supposed to go to the boards and say this has to be decided by the board. That's what the statute says.
But that's what's going to happen. If somebody, and again, if we're going to zone it into the business park, if somebody, or again, we feel this. I know.
All I'm saying is there's a lot to consider because you're talking about. I mean, if you look at, which I learned that it's not listed in the thing, the fact that it says or other similar uses. Other similar uses means nothing, and yet you got multiple units that are occupied in the commercial zone. That's not listed there. So unless you're going to list everything that's permitted or everything that's prohibited, it gets very cumbersome.
This is where this is where the attorneys jump in.
Well, I think that everybody thanks you for your comments. I do think that we should limit conversation on it because I believe the resolution was just adopted last night. So there is the time for appeal. It's memorialized, so the appeal period starts now.
Right.
Well, that's why I asked. I didn't know from the beginning.
Right, and they have 45 days to file. whether it's going to, whether
No,
they're going
that's
to.
fine, but I'm just saying there's a lot to consider, and most importantly, not against our attorneys, but without doing thorough research and thorough input, you may open yourself to a constitutional issue that may go a little bit Supreme Court. But thank you for your time, and
We do appreciate you. Thank you.